study of God. How can it be a science?
Well,
Lawrence, let him answer the question,
Well,
please, because we're not actually going to get anywhere if you're constantly talking over Bill. Please.
Okay. I
And so we need to have, I think, ethical constraints for the use of science, and certainly warfare would be one of these.
So let me just jump in.
You're simply incorrect when you think that science has inherent ethical guidelines within
Honesty,
it. Science,
full
as you have
disclosure,
said,
transparency.
as you've said many times, it doesn't tell how the world ought to be.
Yes, I'm sorry.
In order
I
to
disagree
have
with you.
that
I
moral
disagree
ought,
with you. It tells you if
you
you're
have to have
dishonest
something that is
and not
extra
transparent,
scientific.
you'll come to results which...
Moral values are not found in a test tube.
No, I'm sorry. That's not true.
Surely you can see that the assumption that the good is that which brings about the greatest flourishing for the greatest number of people.
It's not an assumption. I can ask...
There wouldn't be any objectivity. These would be simply the socio-biological spin-offs of evolution and social conditioning.
They would if we...
That's why I said
Okay.
that's not the issue, Dr. Krauss.
I didn't say believing. I said if God did not exist...
There wouldn't be any objective foundation for moral values. And
So which God? Which God gives...
This is a generic argument from some sort of monotheistic faith that would see God as the foundation for objective moral values.
So there's only one of those
duties.
faiths that...
And so I would say that certainly we can develop morally.
So
we realize past mistakes.
Who determines what's...
And that's not a judgment that science can establish. Science tells how the world
I think science
is,
can say...
not how it ought to be,
look,
of what that's about.
I read what you said. Do you disagree with anything you said?
What I pointed out
the
was...
children deserve our own...
No, that's
well,
a
that's what you said.
misrepresentation of what I said, Dr.
Well,
Krauss.
you want to go back and...
They were being divested of the land. That's what's important to these Middle Eastern peoples, and still is today. It's the land.
Absolutely, and you would say, in fact...
Because...
We live, because we live in a world where we realize those kind of divine proclamations.
He is not obligated to prolong my existence for 1 second.
Who determines what God has decided?
No, wait, let me finish. He used Israel as an instrument.
How do you know?
If you don't think he issued the commands, if you think these are just legends or fables, then there's no problem. The whole problem only arises if you think that
there was a problem for the Canaanites.
Wait, okay. I haven't got to my critical point here yet, though.
Okay.
And that is of incomprehensible joy and eternal life in the presence of a loving God.
Well, just like, I'm sorry. I mean, one last thing. Just like the people in the World Trade Center. I'll bite my tongue on that one.
And that he issued these commands described in Genesis.
Can I just make a little comment? I'll try not to be tacky in this regard.
He'll try to develop a consistent theory and account that would make sense of all the data.
No.
He will only throw it out when the efforts to develop a consistent account of the data fail.
No, sorry.
And you can't just say, well, thank you very much, and then dismiss it. Because science can't exist without that conceptual framework.
Well, it can exist.
And that
historically, you're right.
Scientifically.
No, I think the point is that historically...
Why is there something rather than nothing?
But it's just a definition. It's a semantic... You heard this during it? This was a William Craig bullshit meter. I hit it every time. He talked about science and got it wrong.
In your opening speech, when you said you have no respect for distortion and misrepresentation.
Yeah,
because
I
don't think anyone in every case, and we'll talk about this in Sydney.
I'd like to say that, but I quoted you. You gave me an example.
Now, in the case of the models,
I define very carefully what I talk about.
The gravitational equations of general relativity, it is independent of them. And so it will...
at the next talk, we'll just...
Actually...
Or maybe the ecchaotic universe. We'll discuss the statements that, in fact, say that this theorem breaks down.
I'm ready to do it. Vilenkin discusses them, too, and they are not successful models of a past eternal universe.
How do you know?
They won't work because of the scientific articles that have been published on them. For example...
What about the scientific articles that have been published?
Trying to find a model like that, but so far it hasn't been done.
We just don't know the answer. And
Vilenkin, who is one of the premier cosmologists of our day, says, but it is to say...
It's consistent with our universe having a beginning. If you ask me...
Any statement you make can be qualified with the prefix probably.
Because qualifications are what science...
So, of course, it would be untrue then.
Why would that be? Why couldn't
It exhibits one-sided
so
fine-tuning.
this claim
That's
that
not a
somehow
problem.
you know.
Sort of cause. That's the way we're using the term.
Well,
that's
for
a different
example,
question. Things like yourself
what's the cause of the
claim that the universe is not eternal. So this is a quite different
But
question.
there's
that the universe just exists and that's all. It's a brute factor.
And
these could be causal. There's
why
nothing
God?
to do with teleology.
Why God?
Or an unembodied mind
why
or
does it have to be-
consciousness, an abstract object.
all that does is...
Not only our universe, but any wider encompassing multiverse.
What do you mean by...
I mean any sort of space-time reality or something
all of space and time in which event...
Finite members, which is equal in number to the natural numbers.
No, that's one kind of infinity.
That's
non-natural
zero. But growing toward infinity is a limit.
You always say these things, but...
Now look, you are really trying to chase red herrings here to get away from the topic.
Well, you just said it, Bill.
She asked me what was my conception.
Well, you said it. I mean, some people think that, and physicists are the most obnoxious of all scientists. That's true.
No,
but, I'd say that. But just me. Okay.
Do you...
Christian faith is not a brain. Theology is also embarked on the process.
I'm going to ask.
Theology is the study of God. It gives us...
But didn't you say God is the study of God? How can it be a science?
Lawrence, let him answer the question,
Well,
please, because we're not actually going to get anywhere if you're constantly talking over Bill. Please.
Okay. Have at least 10 different physical interpretations of the equations of quantum mechanics. That the same holds for theology. And in fact, I think is patently wrong.
And Zeus is wrong?
And that is a view which is rejected by every historian of the crucifixion of Jesus. And I think
as opposed to the Bible, which was written maybe 50 years...
Judaism, Christianity, Islam, deism.
Why monotheism?
That would account for the existence of objective moral values and duties better than classical
We had this discussion.
To these arguments of natural theology, to say they don't prove Christian God.
No,
They're not
intended
to. I mean, that's just factually not true. I can give examples as well as multiverse hypotheses.
Stephen makes public pronouncements.
Well, now, a moment ago, you were saying that you complained
that theologians said,
what do you mean by knowledge? Now you're saying
I think that
by that, he's talking about physical science, ultimately physics, chemistry, things like that.
You mean empirical evidence? And
he says literary...
I taught at Yale, and I could...
Lawrence, can you please just allow Bill to make the final comment here? Otherwise, we simply will be here all night.
Obviously, anybody who's read that knows that Mr. Collins is not the hero.
Sorry, but that's because
what you said about self-deception and having bad arguments, that
quoting
applies
Alex
to you
Lincoln
equally.
incorrectly.
By name, that the Aguirre and Grattan model and the Carolyn Chen model don't work.
No, he said you have to make it...
All of the evidence shows that the universe had a beginning, and that in these
I would agree
models,
all the evidence.
What I argue is that the premise is more probably true than false. And actually, you agree with me on that the universe began to exist. But I want to
say it's likely that the universe began to exist.
On this claim that I've somehow misrepresented Valentin.
Well, but the key line is the last one.
I noticed that at the end of this paragraph, where the Carol Chen and Aguirre-Grattan models are mentioned, that he specifically shows...
Because it was technical. He talked about the fact that you
Lawrence, hang on a second, just let Bill finish.
He's specific, and that they involve, therefore, a beginning of the universe,
Bill,
just like the others.
You could do the math if you want.
Now,
I'd love you to do it.
I couldn't help notice, although it's down from the screen now, that there was a series of ellipsis points following the paragraph.
Yeah, because it was technical, and I thought
well,
it was,
I wonder what you've deleted from the original letter.
No, wait.
I just told you.
No, wait. Yeah, but you didn't.
I just told you. He says that you assume a minimum of entropy at the lowest point.
You're talking about the cosmological constant.
Yeah.
But you know that the fine-tuning extends far beyond that. There's a
as I told you that
diverse
day,
and multiple
we don't
range
have,
of
and here's the
finely
problem.
tuned. If anywhere in the cosmos life is to evolve and exist.
No, a life like us.
Hang on.
No.
How do you know?
Right, that's not a surprise, but that's not the
But
argument,
other universes
Lawrence.
in which the constants are different.
Life so generally defined wouldn't exist anywhere in the
That's
cosmos.
not true. For example,
without the fine-tuning.
I'm going to a conference with Freeman Dyson,
Lawrence,
who's been having a debate with me about this, and we've been talking about exotic forms of life.
Let Bill finish.
In the there wouldn't even be matter. There wouldn't even be chemistry.
How do you know?
The laws are kept.
There wouldn't be matter like we measure. But if the quark masses were different, there'd be different kinds of matter. In fact, if there's
different forces.
How do you know?
But with different values of the constants and quantities, and therefore we can predict
what
would happen.
One thing you don't understand is
you're not arguing just with me here. You're arguing with all of the physicists who do accept that the universe is incredibly fine-tuned.
There are parameters. Look, I was
life.
one of the first people to point out
the way in which the cosmological constant is fine-tuned is that the life-permitting range is about 1 out of 10 to the 120. It's smaller than its possible range.
But it's 10 to the minus 100.
What it means is that the life-permitting range
includes 0.
And that
10 to the minus 120 times the Planck energy.
Life-permitting range compared to the range of
That's
assumable
if you don't
values.
change any other fundamental. I appreciate your allowing us to have a discussion. In the other two debates, the moderators felt that that their views were what people were coming to listen to. And maybe they are more rational than Bill or I. But the point is, I really appreciate you allowing us to have that conversation.
The Gospels emerge as very credible historical sources. The second one of the, that's what it says in these other creation myths.
They typically
involve a cosmic egg which breaks open, or the blood from a mythological dragon spills out, or the sperm of the gods. If you're right that these other myths are not to be taken literally, then it would be a literary mistake to take them that way. But
just like Genesis.
Yes, I do not think that
the creation myth.
It is a figurative narrative, poetic sort of narrative about the creation of the world.
Just like all the other.
One of these.
So let me just jump in.
You're simply incorrect when you think that science has inherent ethical guidelines.
Honesty,
science,
full
as you have said,
transparency.
you've said many times, it doesn't tell how the world ought to be.
Yes, I'm sorry.
In order to have that moral ought,
it tells you
you have to have something. And so we need to have, I think, ethical constraints for the use of science and certainly warfare with
study of God. How can it be a science?
Well, let him answer the question, please, because we're not actually going to get anywhere if you're constantly talking over Bill. Please.
Okay. That is
not
extra
transparent,
scientific.
you'll come to results which
moral values are not found in a test tube.
No, I'm sorry, that's not true.
Surely you concede that the assumption that the good is that which brings about the greatest flourishing for the greatest number of people.
It's not an assumption. I can ask.
There wouldn't be any objectivity. These would be simply the socio-biological spin-offs of evolution and social conditioning.
They would if we...
That's why I said that's not the issue, Dr. Krauss.
I didn't say believing. I said if God did not exist...
There wouldn't be any objective foundation for moral values and
so
duties.
Which God gives...
This is a generic argument from some sort of